Carly Sherrod joining me with OnDefend. You are now the Director of Threat Intelligence and Programs. What a cool title. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here.
So, Carly, tell me a little bit, what is your role in OnDefend?
Yeah, so you gave the fancy title. Sounds cooler than it actually is. To kind of break it down, threat intelligence is simply just taking or curating information, processing it, putting some analysis and context to that, and then putting out some type of product. So some type of informative information that then allows us to, say, overlay that with a threat modeling and cybersecurity or some type of additive to either a proactive or a reactive response from the cyber side. So that's kind of the threat intelligence side of the role. The director of programs role is really kind of more comprehensive. So idea behind that would be any type of program that OnDefend is looking to go from a directional standpoint, whether that's a strategic standpoint of cybersecurity or more operational, I would be able to have some type of role in managing or designing that program. So that's the kind of bigger of what the actual fancy title is representing here with OnDefend.
Very, very high level, but obviously very, very cool. I mean, how do you even get started in cybersecurity to end up where you are today?
I would say I'm a little different, but I think there's a lot more different people joining the cybersecurity workforce, especially in senior roles now, which is exciting. So what I mean by different is my degree has nothing to do with cyber. I am a master's degree in healthcare administration. Thought I wanted to do healthcare management, maybe even go be a physician assistant or a doctor. Did a bunch of technical rescue stuff, which ultimately led me into working for the state of North Carolina with the Department of Public Safety. I ended up doing some of that for a while and fell into intelligence. And so when I say intelligence, more like critical infrastructure intelligence, counterterrorism type intelligence, basic intel that we would consider in the intelligence community. And with that came cyber, because cyber is the national and now the global, largest threat within the world. So it's one of those things that you sort of develop. And where I kind of started was actually more in human trafficking and general kind of child porn from the background of law enforcement association, and then more of critical infrastructure engagement and understanding from a cyber element. And then that sort of evolved into more of what you would think of from the general population of ransomware defense and evasion and actual advanced persistent threat actor or adversarial action. So with that, just sort of transitioned into different roles, had a lot of opportunities thrown at me from technical to strategic to executive, and ended up finding this role and being recruited, and I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, you kind of hinted at it, but talk to me about what were some career highlights? I mean, you've worked for some pretty big names and have had some pretty big titles.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest highlights I would say in my career was actually I was in a position in which I was supporting the state, and there was several incidents or events that occur throughout, right? So you can say an incident can be anything from that e-crime, which is more like criminal from a perspective of ransomware that you commonly think of, or you can look toward more like the advanced persistent threat, which is more nation state sponsored, more when you think about a foreign country kind of actively or entering an intrusion into a system of something like that. So what happened within this environment is that I was given the opportunity to lead multiple incidences that were affiliated with entities that were being impacted by either these advanced adversaries or these criminal adversaries. So for me, the career highlight was really being given the opportunity to not just respond as more of a ground responder, meaning somebody that's hands on keyboard, fighting behind the scenes you would think about in a computer, but actually being able to lead an actual incident and kind of help guide people through a response, both from a client-based side, so the company that's impacted, as well as your personal team that you're guiding through resource allocation and prioritization of fighting an active adversary within an environment.
Yeah, that really, I mean, I know I use the word highlight, but it's hard to use the word highlight when you're talking about cybersecurity because usually it's not necessarily a good story that you're working on, but you're able to make such an impact. And I think that's why a lot of us get into it.
Yeah.
And then take me through a little bit more specifically. Can you tell me a little bit about those roles, like, and then what led to your next transition, and then obviously eventually here?
Yeah, so my last title was interim state chief risk officer or state chief information security officer. So that's essentially the state official for cybersecurity for the state of North Carolina. And prior to that, I was the deputy CISO in that same role.
And then where did you transfer from there?
Then I ended up at CrowdStrike, actually, working as a principal consultant in their digital forensics and incident response professional services arm. So that's a consulting arm where we would, directly respond to active threats and incidences as companies or organizations call in for help, where you're actually, actively fighting, adversaries and helping companies get back restored into a stable state.
I mean, you've had this career. What excites you most about joining the OnDefend team?
Yeah, so I would say it's twofold. From a company perspective, OnDefend is in such a great position. They are a stable company, but they're growing. And what is exciting about being a stable company that's still fairly new and actively having exponential growth is that I get to come and be a part of that build. And I get to come in from the ground and work with this very amazing, very hand-picked team to make some of these decisions that are going to impact the company downrange. So from a company perspective, that's probably my most exciting thing is I get to build and help mature a program that's sort of, I would say, our threat intelligence program is in its infancy. We have threat modeling, we have some threat intel, but this opportunity allows me to really build and mature that and kind of adapt it to the future needs of cyber, which I think is actively changing. From a personal standpoint, I'm excited because, like you said, I have done quite a lot in my career, and I'm only 35. I'm okay with sharing my age with the world. But 35 is a great age where I've had a lot of work experience, but I still have a lot to go. And so, what's exciting for me is that on a personal level, this is a good position to challenge myself too. So, I get to apply a lot of some of the executive and management skills from some of my past careers, but then I get to do that in a more challenging environment where I really am helping lead that forefront within this model within a company. And that's going to be good for me for both that personal and kind of professional growth. So those are the things I'm really excited about with joining the company.
I love that so much. Looking back at your career, is there maybe one specific project or something you worked on that you were specifically really proud of?
Okay, so a specific project. I would say yes, and it's actually fairly recent. Without sharing too many details, some of my past recent work in the world of cyber operations and cyber fighting adversaries, we typically name in the cyberspace active adversaries. So, for example, a lot of times you'll hear like an animal that translates to, say, a nation state. So, a good example are pandas are typically associated with China, bears are typically associated with Russia, et cetera, and so forth. And so in my career, I was lucky enough to be able to participate in a lot of active engagement from identification and sort of identifying this massive network of state operators that are essentially attributed to Chilimas, which Chilima is North Korea. And that's related to some of the public information, that's been out around actual the IT worker scams that people may have heard about, where it's essentially seeking false employment into companies. So I was lucky enough to be a very small part of that within the world, and that really attributed to, a brand new named threat actor within the cyber community known as Famous Chalima, which was really owned and owned by CrowdStrike for that naming. But what's cool about that is that sometimes just being in the right place at the right time and having hard work and being able to communicate with people, express those concerns and patterns, and then having the right team and the right backing can lead to something you would never expect, which was, kind of helping identify tactics, techniques, and procedures of an entirely kind of separated group associated with a massive threat actor. So I would say, at least for now, it's probably one of my favorite, proud projects.
That is so cool. So you're one of the people that why we call things scattered, spidered, and
I
big
wouldn't say
bear
I'm one of the
jumping
people.
across the river, whatever names they've come up with.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm one of the people of why for sure. That's definitely owned by like CrowdStrike and other massive companies for the naming. But yes, I had the opportunity within my career to be a very small part of that with one specific adversary.
That's really cool. What's something that people should know about you? I might take a guess and gander and say what's behind you could be
Oh,
an interesting fact. But what is something about you that you want people to know?
sure. Well, yeah, since you said it, and it's clearly now publicly in the image, I love fantasy novels. It's a huge thing. So everything from epic to high fantasy to, your stereotypical romantic fantasy. I'm definitely in that realm, and I would be remiss to say that Harry Potter is not one of the starting ones for me for that. But absolutely love fantasy novels, and from an outdoor perspective, I'm really avid with hiking and camping too. So those are kind of two fun facts about me.
Love that. I'd also be remiss using your word right there if I didn't mention, two women in cyber having an interview, having a conversation like this is actually very rare.
Yeah.
You don't see this very often. What is your words of encouragement or maybe advice to other women coming up in their career in cyber right now to get to your level?
That's a really good question. If I could go back and talk to, Carly at 20, I would definitely recommend it's kind of two things I would say. One would be open to opportunity, I think was the biggest thing. So I think often we kind of get in our head, we're gonna be this person and this is our dream. And sometimes you get there and you realize it's not exactly what you thought. At least for me, that's exactly what happened with healthcare and administration and stuff. I did it, didn't love it the way I thought I would. And I don't think I would be where I am if I wasn't open to opportunities that were presented to me when they were presented. So I would say, be willing to take an opportunity, be willing to take risk. There really isn't a reward without some form of risk. So that's probably one piece of advice. The other advice that I saw, especially with women in cyber coming up in the junior roles, that probably affect a lot of other women that maybe are thinking of transitioning into cyber and haven't yet, be okay with speaking up and be okay with failing. I know people say that a lot, but it's really true. No question is typically dumb when you're starting. Right. I mean, obviously, if it's something like on the first sentence of an onboarding page and you ask it, that might be a little off. But as far as general technical aptitude and learning, I don't know everything. I am not a subject matter expert in every single element of cyber. That's why we have teams of people and experts and technical leads in different spaces. But what I am really good about doing is saying, "Ooh, that's out of my limit. I either can go learn that independently really quickly, or I may need to tap somebody for help and get some official training or look to them for guidance." And I think that's really important. And I think that people are really afraid, especially women sometimes, to be okay with that because I know, at least for me, I used to feel like if I admitted to not knowing something, that was going to be a negative mark toward me and toward the respect that my colleagues, especially my male colleagues, would give me. And I have learned slowly that that's not really true. I mean, sometimes it is, but I would say, especially now, there's more allies than there are people against your success. And if you're willing to say like what you need or what you think, I have found, at least in my experience, that there's more people that are willing to kind of step up and help you reach those goals and give you those opportunities than there are that are looking to, keep you down or not allow you to shine. And that's more of a third thing. Don't ever decrease your light or your excitement or your passion for anything to make somebody else feel more comfortable. That is another thing I've learned. And I'm still working on that. There's still sometimes I'm like, oh, Carly, you know this. Don't be afraid to say it. So
Speak
that
up
would
for
be my
yourself.
advice. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because it's very likely you will be the minority in the room. And it's just the fact and reality. But just,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, looking forward, obviously you've talked about you're so excited about this promising future you have because you still have a whole career ahead of you. You've
Yes.
had a career, but you have a whole one ahead of you.
Hopefully.
Where do you really think we will be? Where would the state of cybersecurity be in about 5 years?
Oh, that's a good
Oof.
question. As far as where it'll be, I'm not really sure. As far as where I would like to see it from our perspective as those working in the field, I really want to be more proactive and way more dynamic. I think that cyber and technology is so rapidly growing and changing faster than sometimes we can as people kind of keep up with it from a job role or a certification or an aptitude perspective, that we kind of lose that ability to adapt and change and get creative in how we think. And I think, especially from speaking of a threat intelligence perspective and fighting adversaries, we're going to have to be creative and dynamic and adaptive to be able to fight that. And I'm hoping that in the next 5 years, we can kind of shift away from some of the regulatory compliance that are not necessarily hitting the mark and shift more toward how do we actually get ahead of some of this stuff, and how can we be more proactive and more offensive in protecting, infrastructure and people's privacy and people's data. So that's where I'm really hoping, especially with artificial intelligence around the corner. I think there's a lot of great things AI can do. And there's a lot of ways it can be used securely. And then there are a lot of ways in which we might want to rethink about, posting some information that may just go anywhere. So I think those are the things from the next 5 years that I'm interested in seeing, and hoping we kind of reach a more dynamic, creative way of balancing that.
Carly Sherrod, Director of Threat Intelligence and Programs, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.